My name is Luna. When I was 17, my father, Douglas, looked me straight in the face during dinner and said, "You're not a boy, so stop wasting time on those pointless computers." He slammed his spoon against the glass, like he had just delivered an undeniable truth. My mother, Evelyn, said nothing. She looked down and started clearing the dishes, as always. My two older brothers, Dean and Bradley, sat upright. They didn't laugh, but their eyes sparkled like they were watching a familiar performance. I still remember the lump in my throat as I held out the acceptance letter to Stanford's summer computer science program. My hands were trembling, but I still managed to say, "It's a full scholarship, Dad. They only chose 6 people in the entire country." He glanced at the paper and tossed it onto the table. "Programming? For what? You plan to sit at home typing for the rest of your life? No one's going to marry a girl like that. If you insist, leave this house." I looked at my mom, hoping for a word of protest, a hand on my shoulder, anything. But she just stood there, wringing the kitchen towel, eyes fixed on the floor, like if she stayed quiet long enough, she might disappear from the moment. Dean was the first to break the silence. He chuckled. "Well, Luna, maybe Stanford will give you a free laptop. You can use it to write Dad an apology when you fail." Bradley added, "No need for all that schooling just to be a tech assistant. A short course at community college would do." My face burned. Not from anger but humiliation, from knowing they were wrong, but I had no voice in that house. That night, I packed while the rest of the family watched the evening news. Every step down the stairs felt like a closing argument, heavy and quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just left a note on the kitchen table. If I were a boy, I'd still be here. No one walked me out. No hugs. No goodbyes. I stood outside the door with my old suitcase in hand, July wind cutting across my face. Even when the taxi arrived, I looked back one last time, still hoping someone would come out. No one did. Dean and Bradley kept going to board meetings and business summits in the Boston area with Dad. Meanwhile, I was couch surfing and living off church meals near campus. They were called the legacy of the Carter family. I was the one who left for silly tech stuff. I thought I would break. But I didn't let that happen. I enrolled in a tech school, took every job I could find. Barista, house cleaner, on-call tech repair. As long as it paid. As long as I didn't have to call home asking for anything. I turned fury into fuel. Every line of code I wrote carried a quiet declaration. I will succeed, and no one in that house gets to deny it. As for them, they never spoke of me again. Not in family bios, not in photos. Not even on televised interviews where Dad proudly listed his accomplished children. Not once. Not my name. 15 years after that night, I sat in the glass-walled boardroom on the 48th floor of Arctix Labs, the headquarters of the company I'd built from nothing. Behind me stretched the Manhattan skyline, glowing in the sunset. In front of me sat 5 executives, awaiting approval on a $1.3 billion partnership proposal. I wore a fitted graphite suit. Hair pinned back neatly, my hands steady. No longer shaking like they used to when I took freelance coding gigs in Cambridge. Every move I made was watched by the press, investors, and Silicon Valley insiders. They called me Luna McNeil, the new queen of AI. I was mid-sentence with the CFO when Madison, my personal assistant, slipped a small note onto the table. It read just one line. "Your mother has called 3 times today." I froze. The name still read Mom, Home, on my phone. I had never deleted it in 15 years. My chest tightened by instinct, but I kept my professional smile. "I'll review the numbers again. Send me the updated projections by 9 a.m. tomorrow." Meeting adjourned. I returned to my private office. The glass door closed behind me, sealing the silence. I stared at my phone as if it were a trap. Then, I picked it up. Evelyn's voice trembled, softer than I remembered. "Lena, is that you?" "It's me," I said flatly, not calling her mom. Silence. Then she tried to steady her tone. "Your father, he wants to see you. We all do." I let out a laugh, sharp, bitter. "Air 15 years? I thought I wasn't worth the air he breathed. Things are different now. We've seen you on the news, in magazines. The world is talking about you. Your father's. The company is struggling. That stock crash last week hit us hard. He wants money?" I cut in. "Or just wants to borrow my name to patch up his sinking reputation?" She didn't answer. That silence was familiar. Just like all the years I spent under Dean and Bradley's shadow. "There's a family dinner on Friday," she continued, voice small. "At Grey Ember. The usual place we went for the holidays. He'll be there." I hung up without a word. 5 minutes later, I called Jenna, my co-founder and closest friend from our MIT days. "They reached out," I said quickly. "I'm going to that dinner. But first, cancel my Friday schedule. I want a private table booked at Grey Ember. Orion Room. Top floor." Jenna sighed. "Luna, don't do anything reckless. I know how much it hurt back then. Just don't let the anger weaken your position." "I'm not being reckless," I replied, eyes locked on the framed photo in my office. Me and my first research team crammed into a tiny lab when I was 24. "I'm preparing a performance." That night, I opened the safe under my desk and pulled out a small box. Inside was a single photo. Me at 12, clutching a chip model I'd built, my face glowing with pride, showing it to my father. He wasn't even looking at me. He was smiling at Bradley, who had just won the neighborhood baseball trophy. The next morning, I texted my mother. "Change of plans. I'm hosting. 8 p.m., Orion Room. Top floor, Grey Ember. Invite Dad and both my brothers." An hour later, I called Alan, Architects' PR director. "I need discreet photographers. No paparazzi. But make sure they capture every glance, every handshake." He hesitated. "What's the PR message?" I looked out the window. Morning light reflected against the glass, showing a woman who no longer resembled the abandoned girl she once was. "Family reconciliation," I said slowly. "The forgotten daughter returns." Then, I set the phone down and whispered. "But only I know. This is the night they learn their lesson. Loud and expensive." The Orion Room was on the 55th floor of Grey Ember. The most luxurious restaurant in the Upper East Side, with a crystal ceiling arching like the dome of an opera house, and a view directly over Central Park. I chose this place not for the memories, but because it was the perfect stage for a carefully orchestrated performance. At 7:45, I was already there. Every detail was arranged exactly as I wanted. White lilies on the table, the evening's menu featuring Wagyu beef and Kaluga caviar, lighting soft as velvet, and of course, Alan's photographer stationed discreetly in a corner behind a screen. At 7:59 the glass doors opened. My father entered first, his old charcoal gray suit pressed meticulously. His hair, more gray than I remembered, but his posture still rigid, just like the day he'd told me I wasn't worthy of the McNeil name. My mother followed, nervously scanning the room, as if she couldn't believe the luxury before her. Dean and Bradley came last, each displaying a different kind of hidden anxiety beneath their expensive suits. I didn't stand. I simply smiled and gestured to the head of the table. No one dared sit. I nodded slightly, then sat down myself, and they followed. The server brought up the wine, a bottle of Chateau Margaux 1996, the very type my father had once derided as useless luxury. I took the initiative and raised my glass. "To family," I said, "and to the unexpected changes in life." Dean took a sip, glancing at me as if trying to guess what I was up to. My father kept his composed facade, only saying, "You look successful." I smiled lightly. 15 years will do that, if you have enough drive. You know that, right? He didn't answer. My mother quietly placed her hand on the napkin, as if searching for support. When the appetizers were served, I placed my tablet in the center of the table. I believe we don't need to beat around the bush. I've seen the financial report from McNeil and Sons. 3 consecutive quarters of losses. 3 failed projects, and a 42% drop in stock value in just 6 months. If there's no strong investment soon, the board will vote to replace the CEO in less than 4 weeks. My father's face turned pale, but I didn't stop. And Dean, the venture capital department you oversee is bleeding funds. $18 million into 3 companies that have yet to produce a commercial product. I have a risk analysis if you need to review it. Dean put his glass down, a little harder than necessary. You've been investigating us? No. I've been collecting data, big difference. The table fell silent. I let them take a moment to digest. Then, I leaned forward, my tone still calm as if discussing business. I will save the company, but under one condition. Bradley laughed bitterly. You're turning this family affair into a business deal? Not a business deal. A public image overhaul, I replied. And I'm the only one capable of making it happen. I looked at each of them. Father, you will speak at the Women Forward Gala hosted by Arctics next month. In front of all the press, television, and investors. You will declare that your daughter, Luna McNeil, is proof of the potential and leadership of women in technology. My father clenched his fists on the table. Dean, you'll establish a separate investment fund within McNeil & Sons, focused on funding women-faced startups in STEM. The fund must operate for at least 3 years, with an initial commitment of $5 million. Dean glared. You can't force me into some kind of moral charade. It's not a charade. I will control the investment list. You'll just be the public face. I turned to my mother. And you? You will be the sponsor of the Maven Minds Scholarship Program for high school girls in New York pursuing engineering. Your image will be featured in all promotional materials and media coverage. Evelyn's mouth opened in shock. I don't know anything about scholarships. You don't need to. You just need to stand behind it, genuinely. My father slammed his hands on the table, his gaze heavy. And if we refuse? I smiled, the first time that evening revealing my teeth. Then I'll sit in my office and watch the empire you built crumble to dust. Trust me, I have all the tools to do it, and still maintain the image of the good daughter. I placed my glass down, tapping it lightly once on the cold black stone table. The choice is yours. But time is running out. My mother quietly nodded. Dean ground his teeth. My father closed his eyes for a second. Then said, We'll consider it. I stood up, grabbed my tablet. No need to consider. I'll send the agreement to the family lawyer tomorrow morning. I paused at the door, looking back at them. 3 faces that had once abandoned me, now sitting in silence under the chandelier's glow. And don't worry, my PR team will make sure everyone looks perfect, like a civilized, progressive, and loving family. I stepped out of the room, the cool breeze from the hallway brushing against my shoulder. The performance had only just begun. The dinner unfolded exactly as I had planned. Gray ember remained luxurious and cold, but this time, the chandelier lights didn't bring warmth. They reflected the tension in every glance. My mother sat quietly, her hands tightly gripping the napkin. While Dean and Bradley struggled to mask their anxiety, my father tried to maintain composure, but I saw the tension in his shoulders every time I mentioned numbers. The main course arrived, perfectly sliced Wagyu beef, and I began my version of reconciliation. Everyone watched me, waiting for the silence to break. The truth is, McNeil & Sons is on the edge, I began, eyes locked on my father. The stock is crashing, your projects have failed, and without a drastic change, your investors will walk in a matter of weeks. He lifted his head just enough to look at me through his glasses. My mother sighed, as if she'd known this moment would come. Dean and Bradley said nothing, only exchanged nervous glances. "Luna, are you threatening your own family?" my father asked, voice low but straining for control. I smiled, but not out of pleasure. I knew I had hit the nerve. "This isn't a threat, Dad. It's reality, and I'm the only one who can help," I said clearly, turning my gaze to Dean and Bradley. "If you don't want to watch the company collapse, I'm your only shot. But I don't come free." Dean frowned. "What do you want?" "Simple," I said, swiping across my tablet to pull up a drafted agreement. "You'll speak at the Women Forward Gala I'm hosting. You'll say that your daughter, Luna McNeil, is living proof of women's success in tech. This is your last shot at salvaging any respect from the investment world." Bradley scoffed. "A speech? So you want us to be props in your little show?" I looked at him quietly. "If not, I walk, and the company becomes ash. You can choose, but here's what I know. If Dad refuses, the board will replace him. That's just business." My mother looked at me with dazed eyes. She hadn't spoken on family matters in years, but now, seeing how I wasn't just playing a game, how I was controlling the entire table, she seemed to finally grasp the shift. "And you, Mom?" I turned to her, voice firmer now. "You'll lead a scholarship program for girls passionate about tech. Your name will be attached to every success story it produces." She looked down, her voice shaking. "Luna, I don't know what to do with all of this." "That's okay, Mom. You don't have to do anything. You just have to say yes. Everything else is already in motion." I smiled, scanning each face. My father no longer wore that old air of confidence. He lowered his hands, looking like a man who just lost the game. "And finally, Dean." I turned to him and paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "You'll head the new Women in STEM division. Whether you like it or not, that's what the company needs." Dean said nothing, but the fury in his eyes said everything. He had no choice. I stood up, pulled my black coat from the chair, ready to leave the room. It felt like the final move in a long, calculated match, and I had cornered every piece on the board. "Everything I asked for will be executed this week," I said without looking back. "Otherwise, don't expect my help." I walked out of the restaurant without a goodbye. That night, I didn't dwell on outcomes. I just felt relief. It was time they realized they couldn't keep using me. Everything I'd done, everything I'd built, was to create a future I controlled. But then, the next morning, something unexpected. A message from my mother. "Luna, we agree. We'll work together, but you should know, part of me has always been proud of you." I sat at my desk, reading the message again, and let a small smile slip. We might never be the same family again. But I had changed everything. 3 days after the dinner at Grey Ember, a 3-minute clip from Dean's live interview unexpectedly went viral across all social media platforms. My brother sat on a blue velvet sofa in a small NY12 studio, facing a seasoned journalist who read aloud the final question. "If you could say one thing to your sister, Luna McNeil, right now, what would it be?" Dean went silent. An unusually long pause on live TV. Then suddenly, he pulled out a handkerchief, wiped his eyes, and said, his voice breaking, "I think we were wrong. All of us. I used to think I was better than her just because I was a man. But for 15 years, Luna made it on her own. I don't deserve to be her brother. But if I could, I'd like to start over, not for the company, but because I truly regret it." He nearly couldn't finish the last sentence. The host gave a solemn nod, and I sat frozen in my office, watching the footage in silence. The Arctic's PR team called me within minutes. Shares and reposts were skyrocketing. And the hashtag, #ForgiveDean, was trending nationwide within 6 hours. Alan walked into my office at 11 p.m., his face lit with excitement. "Luna, I've never seen a family PR campaign hit like this." Dean cried, "On live TV. It was raw, it was real. Media gold." I shook my head softly, staring at the paused frame of Dean bowing his head. I knew him. Dean wasn't a performer, and he never showed emotion easily. If he cried, something inside him had truly shifted. The next morning, my mother called. For the first time in years, I let the phone ring 4 times before answering. "Did you see Dean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I did, so did the rest of the world." She was quiet for a moment, then spoke like a confession. "I've kept every article about you, from the day you launched the company to when you made Forbes 30 Under 30. I printed them out, put them in a folder. Your father doesn't know." I didn't reply, my throat tightened. "I've stayed silent too long," she said, steadier now. "But I don't want to stand on the sidelines anymore. Today I called the Maven Minds Foundation. I want to see how the girls work. I want to learn." That afternoon, she showed up at our tech center in Brooklyn, glass building, funded by Arctics, home to 40 high school girls each year. She wore a simple beige suit, no makeup, no entourage. When I came to greet her, she simply said, "Show me what you've built." I gave her a full tour. Long rows of laptops, bright graphic screens, the steady clack of keyboards, and occasional bursts of laughter as girls coded games, built AI models, and developed apps to help their communities. She stood for a long time beside a group testing an emergency locator app for women living alone. A curly-haired girl turned politely. "You're Luna's mom, right? She's the reason I started coding." My mother smiled, but silent tears ran down her cheeks. 2 days later, New York Leader ran a feature titled, "Old Family, New Future," highlighting my mother's return now as the face of Maven Minds. The lead photo showed her leaning over a young girl typing her first line of code, hand gently resting on the child's shoulder. No distance, no doubt. Bradley followed next. He didn't go public like Dean or Mom, but one day, Sarah, Arctic's COO, notified me that a new internal project proposal had come through from the finance branch, where Bradley worked. I opened the pitch deck. The title, "Digital Daughters, a personal finance education platform for high school girls. Powered by AI for customized learning tracks." I didn't have to ask who wrote it. That night I sat in my office, gazing out the wide glass window. The city still sparkled beneath me. My family, those who once turned away, were slowly stepping into the light. Not for fame, not for profit, but because they finally saw the value of what I had created. And for the first time in 15 years, I started to believe in a word I thought had died in me long ago. Family. The main hall of Van Astor Hotel that evening shone like an award ceremony. The Women Forward Gala I hosted had become the biggest tech event of Q1, with over 800 guests. Top investors, government representatives, young founders, STEM students, and the media. Outside, a long line of reporters scrambled for the best angles, while inside, every seat was numbered, every light, every flower meticulously arranged to my specifications. I stood backstage, wearing a sapphire gown, elegantly cut, with an Apple Watch on my wrist, the first generation I had bought with my freelance coding salary at 22. In front of me was a massive LED screen displaying the event name and the phrase, "Lead with purpose, lead with change." Alan approached from the right. "Mrs. McNeil is ready. Mr. Douglas is rehearsing his speech for the last time. Dean and Bradley arrived early, talking to the sponsors." I nodded, my eyes briefly scanning the list of speakers printed on heavy gold ink paper. My mother was the first speaker. When the background music played, she stepped on stage with a confident air, her white suit simple yet elegant, hair neatly tied back. She walked calmly toward the microphone. "I am Evelyn McNeil. And I am Luna's mother," she began clearly. For many years, I stayed silent. Not because I didn't know how talented my daughter was, but because I didn't have the courage to stand up against prejudice. But today, I want to publicly say that I am proud of Luna. And I want to spend the rest of my life helping girls who have been overshadowed like my daughter once was. The entire audience stood and applauded. I watched from behind the curtain, my eyes watering. Next was Dean. He walked onto the stage in a gray-silver suit, holding his notes tightly. "I used to think I understood leadership," he said, lifting his head. "But then I saw my sister turn a dream into a billion-dollar company, and I realized, if we don't use our power to open doors for others, we're just keeping the key in our pockets." Dean announced the She Builds initiative, a new department at McNeil & Sons investing in female-founded startups. For the first time, I saw him not trying to steal the spotlight, but simply doing the right thing. My turn came last, but before I stepped on stage, Alan unexpectedly handed me a USB. "Luna, you should take a look at this first. A group of students from the Brooklyn program sent this over." I opened the file on the backstage laptop. On the screen appeared a simple yet incredibly intelligent AI software. Its interface like a normal email editor but capable of detecting gender bias in internal corporate language. Assertive for men, but aggressive for women. It suggested how to rewrite to create a fairer environment. A line at the end of the demo video read, "This is Quinn Protocol, named after the person who taught us that we don't need permission to change the world." I gripped the USB tightly, then stepped onto the stage. The lights shone down, and hundreds of eyes were on me. I began with a truth that wasn't easy to say. When I was 17, my father kicked me out of the house because I wasn't the son he wanted, and today, I stand here, not to relive the past, but to prove that a wound doesn't need to be hidden if it leads to something better. I introduced the scholarship recipients. Girls from across states, from rural areas to urban ones, from public schools to homeschool. Each one was a flame waiting to be kindled. Finally, I invited my father onto the stage. The room fell silent. Douglas McNeil walked up slowly, his hands gripping a piece of paper but not trembling. He stopped at the microphone, looked down at the crowd, and then met my gaze. "I was the CEO of McNeil & Sons," he began, his voice firm. "But, from today, I no longer hold that position. The new leader of our company is someone who understands the modern world, understands technology, understands people, and most importantly, she knows when to forgive." He turned to me. "Luna, I was wrong. I've been wrong from the start. But if you'll allow it, I want to step back and do something much harder. Be a part of your vision." The entire room erupted into applause. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded, and for the first time in my life, under the dazzling lights of the gala, I saw my father bow his head. Not in defeat, but because he had just learned a lesson he had been avoiding all his life. 2 days after the gala, I returned to the Arctic's office close to midnight, following a long meeting with the global strategy team. New York had quieted down. The city, still glowing in the aftermath of the Women Forward frenzy, had cooled. But something inside me hadn't. As I stepped into the marble lobby, light from the chandeliers reflected off the polished floor, empty and cold. I intended to head straight to the 48th floor, but then I saw someone sitting near the reception desk. A familiar figure. Bradley. He stood up when he saw me, nodded slightly, holding a small USB wrapped in a red velvet pouch. You still work late just like before. And you still show up unannounced? I replied, stepping closer, not hiding the edge in my voice. What is it? Bradley didn't answer immediately. Instead, he placed the USB on the stone countertop between us. Remember your old laptop, that little silver HP? The one with the nearly full hard drive that squealed every time you opened a project? I stayed quiet. I knew what he was about to say. You left it at home after graduation. Mom wanted to toss it, but I kept it. And I found this. He pushed the USB toward me. It's the plan you wrote. Detailed. Every step. The entire revenge playbook. From rebuilding your public image, to the script for forcing Dad out. Even the financial model for destabilizing McNeil & Sons stock. I inhaled deeply. My chest tightened, like someone had wrapped both hands around 15 years of pain I no longer wanted to face. I wrote that when I was 18, I whispered. I know. And I get it, Bradley said seriously. But now? You're Luna McNeil of Arctics, the woman who just brought 40 girls on stage to receive scholarships. You can't live in both versions of yourself. It's time to choose. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a second USB black, unmarked. This one's a copy. You could go public. Expose everything. Show the world you weren't the angel. They'd see you as the mastermind all along. I stared at the two drives on the table. One red, one black. One held the plan I once clung to. The other? An invitation to destroy every illusion. Bradley stepped back. The choice is yours. But if you want to go further, you have to ask yourself, what do you want to be remembered for? Then he left, leaving me alone with two pieces of my past. An hour later, I stood at the city plaza, both USBs in my hand. The fountain still whispered beneath amber lights, shimmering like a muted flame in a city that never fully slept. I stood beside the cool stream pouring over the granite. I gripped the two USBs tightly, my hands trembling not out of fear, but because I knew what this moment meant. One gesture, and I'd be closing the door on a part of me I once called strength. I thought of my mother's speech on stage. My father's words. Dean's tear-filled eyes. The pride in Bradley's face before he walked away. I thought of the Quinn Protocol, built by the scholarship girls, and the puzzled look on a little girl's face when she once asked me, "Did anyone ever say girls aren't good at math?" I didn't need to answer. I raised my hand. The USBs were cold in my palm. And then I let them go. They fell like two autumn leaves, drifting gently, disappearing into the fountain's depths, where no spotlight could reach. I stood there a moment, breathing deep. I had released more than data. I had let go of a shadow that had clung to me for 15 years. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had something greater. The next morning, at the press conference announcing Arctic's new partnership with the National Technology Alliance, a reporter asked me, "Have you ever thought about getting back at those who underestimated you?" I smiled. Yes. But I chose to build the future instead of digging up the past. Because if you keep looking over your shoulder, you'll miss what's ahead. Hundreds of flashes erupted, but I didn't care. I had thrown the past into the water. And the miracle was, it didn't drag me down. It let me rise. And this time, I rose on my own terms. 1 year after that historic gala night, the tech world had changed. And so had I. I stood on stage at the Global Leadership Forum in Geneva, beneath the glowing words, "Future by Design." In my hand was a mic. Before me, delegates from over 60 countries and thousands of women leaders in STEM from across the continents. "We call it Project Origin," I said, lifting my chin. "Because it's not just a scholarship program. It's the starting point for a new generation. One that knows how to build, how to share, and most importantly, never has to ask permission to pursue its passion." Project Origin was the global scholarship initiative I founded, supported by over 40 major tech corporations and international NGOs. In its first year alone, it reached more than 17,000 female students across 28 countries, awarding over 3,000 formal scholarships in AI, cybersecurity, and robotics. The lead academic coordinator? My father, Douglas McNeil. The same man who once kicked me out of the house for coding instead of learning how to be a wife. Now, he hosts weekly workshops for girls at the Brooklyn Central Library. I once visited one. When I walked in, I found him hunched over helping a 9-year-old named Ellie fix a Python syntax error. So patiently that I furrowed my brows, not recognizing him at first. After the session, he drove me back to HQ, and in the car, he sighed. Turns out daughters can code better than their fathers. I didn't reply. I just looked at him in the rearview mirror. And saw not the man who once dismissed me, but a father learning everything from the beginning. Dean, now head of investment at McNeil & Sons, recently completed a full restructuring of the company's talent division. He introduced the Equity Leadership Code as mandatory policy, and built an anonymous feedback system to monitor gender bias. What he once called unrealistic is now standard across the firm. Bradley, the one who once laughed at me for saying girls don't do serious tech, now sits in a Chicago boardroom, pitching the beta version of BreakChain, a behavioral AI-penetrated offense to gambling addiction. Early data shows a 38% reduction in relapse after just 3 months. I used to think nothing could force them to change. But the truth is this: when you stop seeking revenge and start leading, you force others to choose. Fall behind, or catch up. As for me, I'm no longer the girl with an old laptop and nowhere to go. I'm Luna McNeil, founder of Arctics Labs, policy advisor to the Global Tech Alliance, and most recently, the woman on the cover of Time magazine, beneath the headline, "The Woman Who Rewired Silicon Valley." But I never did it alone. My name isn't just a name anymore. Luna Protocol, the evolved version of Quinn Protocol, has now been adopted by 12 North American tech giants into their internal communications systems. The software doesn't just filter gender bias, it learns and suggests culturally aligned, inclusive communication for each corporate environment. Some kids have named their chatbots LunaBot. One even wrote me a letter saying, "I'm not ashamed of liking algorithms anymore, because if Miss Luna got kicked out of her house and still made it, then I'll be okay too." Last week, I got an email from a middle school teacher in Ohio. My 8th graders just completed their first app development project. When I asked who they wanted to thank, 24 out of 26 wrote, "Luna." You don't need to reply. I just want you to know you're creating a seismic shift, and we feel the tremor every day. I printed that email, framed it, and hung it above my desk. Every morning, when I walk into my office, I read the last line again. Thanks for making room for girls like us. I don't know where the future will take me next, but I know this much. If I had chosen revenge, I would have stopped at making them regret it. But because I chose to lead, I gave an entire generation a reason to move forward. And that is how you start a revolution, not with rage, but by making sure no one gets left behind. That afternoon, I wrapped up my talk at the Redesigning Power Summit in Seattle earlier than scheduled. On the way back to the hotel, my assistant Jordan handed me a sealed envelope. No return address. Just a single, handwritten line. For the girl who stayed. Inside was a short letter, the handwriting so familiar I almost stopped breathing. "You won't believe it, but I just finished teaching a class of 12 little girls, and one of them asked, if Mr. Douglas had never changed, would Luna have still become Luna?" I didn't know how to answer. Maybe some things had to happen the way they did. Thank you for not choosing the easy path. And thank you for not letting anger hold you back. I sat quietly for a long time on the wooden bench outside the hotel, watching the city sink into dusk. That letter wasn't an apology. It was recognition. And sometimes, that's worth even more. The next day, I flew back to New York earlier than planned. No announcement. I just wanted to stop by Origin Lab, the global scholarship headquarters I now ran. As I entered the mentor zone, I saw a group of young girls clustered around a whiteboard. One short-haired girl stood confidently in the center of the room, declaring, "We shouldn't code to prove anything to anyone. We should do it because we have ideas. And no one has the right to stop us from trying." I didn't interrupt. I stood silently by the door, watching these girls. Fearless, outspoken, electric. That's when I realized I no longer needed to prove anything. I didn't need validation from the people who once ignored me. Because now, the voices I cared about were theirs. When I stepped inside, the girl in the center, her name was Riley, turned and lit up again. I smiled, walked over, and knelt beside her. "I heard you're working on something pretty incredible. We're building a mobile coding platform for girls in countries without computers," Riley explained, her eyes glowing. "We're calling it Luna Seed." I froze. Seed? A beginning? I looked around the room. There was no stifling silence here. No fear of speaking. No one waiting for permission to dream. And I knew I had already won. Not by making someone fall, but by making sure those who came after me didn't have to rise from the same wounds I did. That evening, I wrote a letter. Not to send, but to keep. Dear Luna, age 17. I know you're angry. I know you want them to kneel, to apologize, to watch you rise and regret every moment they cast you aside. But hear me. You don't need that. You need time. You need patience. And you need to hold on to yourself. One day, you'll walk into a room full of people who once denied you. And they'll rise, not out of fear, but out of respect. But the most important part won't be that they changed. It's that you didn't let your rage change you. You don't need revenge. You need to make a way. And you did. I folded the paper and tucked it behind the frame in my office, just beneath the photo of me holding the very first scholarship recipients. Tomorrow, we'll unveil a new initiative. The Global Luna Index, the world's first gender progress tracker in tech, designed, operated, and evaluated by students from Origin themselves. My name is no longer the focus, it's become a symbol. A symbol for one simple truth. You can be underestimated and still lead. And when you're strong enough to forgive, you liberate not just yourself, but everyone who comes after you. This isn't the end of a battle. It's the beginning of a revolution. Where no one rises because they've been crushed, but because they know they deserve to keep rising. Luna's story proves that the most powerful form of revenge isn't destruction, it's reconstruction. She didn't just survive rejection and bias, she turned pain into purpose and led a true revolution. In real life, anyone who's ever been overlooked has a choice. Stay trapped in the past, or pave the way forward. Luna chose forgiveness, not because those who hurt her deserved it, but because the future deserved a free heart to begin with. What do you think about Luna's journey and the choice she made? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about life, family, and transformation.